Should Breeze topic number 3 says gender war conversations happen because of a lack of cultural organization along the lines of African traditions. Thoughts on what the AES wants to do here. This came with a link that's going to take us to Twitter. On Twitter, this is a tweet from Sahel Revolutionary Soldier that says in Burkina Faso, shout out to our boy Marcus McGee. In Burkina Faso, husband schools are being set up to teach husbands and future husbands to be at best to their wives. The schools teach the men about women's rights, family planning, health, and hygiene. Men are encouraged to include women in making family decisions. It says men who act violently or volatile with their wives in any way are provided that option as an alternative to custodial service. So I guess these are just pictures. Let's see. Yeah, these seem to be pictures of men in a circle group. I appreciate that. Right. So this is happening in Burkina Faso husband schools. That's pretty interesting. Let me just check out some of the comments real quick. Edmund Lubega says, I hope they don't turn men into simps that are unattractive to women and turn the women into insufferable, entitled feminists like a lot of Western women have become. Sahel Revolutionary Soldier says, how do you think teaching men to be good husbands, providing for their families, practicing family planning, going to lead to men becoming unattractive? Ms. B says, add gun training and sniper shooting to the curriculum. Add growing food and hunting game. African women don't want westernized pussy boys. We want husbands. Sahel responds and says, how to provide for the needs of the family, which includes subsistence farming, is all part of the course. So this is an interesting thing, I think. I think it's interesting to discuss here, as we are people who attempt to be nation builders or want to see nation building going on in our neck of the woods. Let me mix it up this time. Let me start with Buana. Buana, what say you to this?
I personally think that Traore is the new. He's 2024 Thomas Sankara. He is how he looks at in terms of building nation or nationhood, in terms of structuring family, in terms of structuring rules, in terms of building his economy. I mean, he is so far in the future, just as Thomas Sankara was. So man, oh goodness, man, I really wish there was some way that I could help or assist Burkina Faso in what they're actually doing on the ground. I know they have external enemies in what they are doing, but whoever is talking to Thomas Traore right now, he is just telling him what the former president was trying to implement, and this brother is going about the business of implementing it. If given opportunity, Koku, whether it's in my country or any other black country, I would try to do make the same kind of measures happen and make it possible. The fact that he has the reins of power to do these kinds of things is a blessing. You have to teach the men how to sometimes you have to teach the men how to be men. And this is the way of going about it. You need classes and training, how to be a responsible father, how to be a responsible husband, what are your responsibilities as a man? What do you need to do? What do you owe not only to the woman but the community itself? They seem to be very fundamental things, like the ABCs of, but these are things that we miss. And the fact that he is trying to implement these things strategically within his government, oh man, it's I don't know, man. I think that the universe has blessed Traore. After what the tragedies of what happened in Burkina Faso with Thomas Sankara was trying to do, and Blaise Compaoré with his greed was trying to overthrow. I think that this is the 2024 version of it, and they are trying to resolve a crisis that existed within Africa itself. I wish this was to spread in Africa like a disease, like a like a disease, like how COVID spread in the Americas. This kind of mentality, all of the things he wants to implement within his country, and I hope it's spread throughout the African world. I'll leave it there.
I think Bonnie said he'll leave it there. Bonnie, it started to chop up a little bit at the end there.
Leave it there.
Yeah. You started to chop up at the end there a little bit. Let me go to Ditso next. Ditso, what say you to what you see in here from the AES?
Okay. This is an interesting conversation in many ways. So I just uploaded a study I was reviewing. I had read it a year or so back ago in regards to this husband schools. Let me put it this way. One, there's no such thing as Western cultures. When referring to the relation between the United States and Europe, if we're talking about Western Hemisphere cultures versus Western European cultures, and its impact and influence in regards of domestic violence, or the what we can refer to as toxic masculinity, I think one of the major conversations that needs to happen is how has colonialism mixed with traditional views in areas of the world where that colonialism was presented has ended up into the necessity of sitting down and doing this type of work of social reconstruction in many ways. Fact, the majority of victims of domestic violence are women. And that does not exclude the fact that there are men who suffer domestic violence. Fact, the majority of murders of women, of what we could call passion murders, are done because of cultural prejudices that have been ongoing for a long, long time in regards of how men relate themselves to women, and especially in the context of marriage. And religions, be it the Abrahamic or any other, have a terrible influence into that. So I do consider this type of thing necessary, as long as the curriculum maintains itself um, in a very stoic and at the same time very what's the word, laical or secular type of curriculum that also understands what elements of traditional internal cultures are feeding the negative behavior of men, and which are those elements that are empowering men to act in a positive manner. So that being said, I would consider this to be something that is necessary not only for Africa but throughout all the world, especially on what we could refer as those areas that were extremely colonized, and whose cultures and traditions intermingled and intermixed with European prejudice. I don't know if I make myself clear on that.
Well, did so. Before I pass the mic to Jose, I had a question for you, and I guess Trigger Happy picked up on it too. But you said that the West doesn't have a culture, but as Trigger Happy 262 plus put here, he says the so-called West has a culture, and they have passed, unfortunately, spread it to the rest of the world, which I personally would agree with. The Americanization, if you will, of other people's cultures. He says if Europeans don't have a cultural substratum, then Black people have no cultural substratum. So, what would you say to that? And why do you say the West has no culture?
One, because the idea of the West as a, let me say it this way. Look what you said. You said the Americanization. However, America is not one particular country. It's consistent of 35 different nations, which the majority are Spanish speaking. Then you have United States as an Anglo and several places in Caribbean. And you have the French and Portuguese. That this being said, the element of this misconception of quote unquote Western cultures is something that is a propaganda established by United States and followed by European. Because when you ask somebody which countries, which nations are part of that Western culture, everybody's going to tell you United States, UK, France, Germany, and very few people are going to mention Canada, for example. So you see that intermingle. And when we're referring to that distinction between Western Hemisphere cultures and Western European cultures, that distinction clearly tells us of a of a complete different world that is only united, not even united, that it's intermingled because of colonialism, not nothing else. So when we talk about Western Hemisphere cultures, many of those elements of the modern day culture originate because of colonialism here, but they are completely and utterly different from how the Europeans in itself form their own cultures. And I'll give one simple example, and I'll give it through Catholicism. Here in Latin America, the theology of liberation originated, and it created a rift against the Catholic Church because it took the so-called teachings of Jesus Christ and said the defense of those who are defenseless is our main cause. We don't care about a pope who does not defend the defenseless. And that created a rift. So, taking that as an example, we see then that this idea of Western cultures that has been widespread, at least within the last 100 years, is an illusion that does not cater to nuance or cater to a more clear distinction of cultures.
I appreciate that. Did so. Trigger Happy says, okay, limit that to the United States then. The point is, it would be absurd to suggest Europeans are not spreading a cultural philosophy. He goes on to say, like, you could problematize the term, quote unquote, the West, and I wouldn't disagree, but nah, Europeans are spreading something, and we need that out of Africa ASAP. And I agree with that. Jose seems to agree. He put up the bullseye emoji. So with that, let's go to Jose, man. Jose, shoot the breeze, topic number 3. Gender war conversations happen because of a lack of cultural organization along the lines of African traditions. Thoughts on what the AES wants to do here with the husband schools? What say?
Well, I agree. I agree with the comments that you read, like 100%. It sounds like a sim factory. The only useful thing about it is maybe the urbanized young, the graduated ones let me give an example. The ones that are graduated from urban, no, not urban, but how do you call it? The countryside, um, rural. What you see happening, maybe even worldwide. What you see happening is that people get a diploma, and then they quote unquote feel too good to work the land and to keep cattle, right? They want to move to the city or to the west, because now they are graduated, and they see their chances in a whole other frequency that will make them dependent. That's maybe a useful approach. But this how to be how to be a husband, you know how you become a husband, by growing up in a home with a father and a mother. That's how you become a husband. And my approach would be to protect women from being seduced by the lifestyle factory, because men are not so, maybe because men are more stubborn. And you hear women speak of independence, but actually they are more like obedient to the government. The more they yell, I'm independent, the more obedient they are to either a boss, where they are employed, or to the government and the law, and whatever. So my approach would be to protect, and I'm emphasizing on that word. My approach would be to protect women against the marketing of lifestyles, because yeah, women and children are more um, vulnerable to advertisements. So I'm afraid this is a sim factory. Also, my experience in West Africa, and then I'm speaking about Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, Gambia, that region. My experience is that women are holy. Even raising your voice to a woman is not appropriate. So I'm like, what's happening here? About violence, domestic violence. Uh, for Again, my life experience is domestic violence is an alcohol issue. I'm sorry. Domestic violence is an alcohol issue. I'm Cape Verdean. In our culture, we have drinking alcohol, rum from sugarcane is a thing. We have our spirit, our home spirit. We call it grog. Uh, Other cultures call it gin. Other cultures call it rum. It's rum from sugarcane. It's number one, right? Food, kachupa, drink, grog. We call it grog. And domestic violence is alcohol, point blank. Alcohol is domestic violence. Domestic violence is alcohol. And that's it. Thanks.
Yo, Jose, don't go there. Don't go here, bro. Don't go here. Are you calling the West Africans, a bunch of simps because their women kind of like is a biggity, and they kind of like run the
No,
roost
no, 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 no. That's not what I'm doing. It's by nature. By nature, the men cater. It's where the people that I frequently, um, that I frequent, the area that I frequent, women are holy. A man uh, burns up himself. Uh, Excuse me, I'm translating from Dutch, right? I think in Dutch, and when I speak English, I'm translating from Dutch. So I hope you can follow my word treasury. But men burn up in service of their wives and automatically children. So they sacrifice themselves for the well-being of the so they sacrifice themselves so that the wife can do what she's supposed to do. Let me put it that way, to be more specific. So this as I said, maybe it's useful for urbanized minds of the young, to get them back to their responsibility of a husband, right? But I mean, no, I mean, it's, yeah, the danger is there. Again, my approach would be to help the women remember to be a wife. That would be my approach.
If I may, I want to just ask a couple questions. One, the if domestic violence is only caused by alcohol, what do we do with the cases where there's no alcohol involved, but there was domestic violence, and that domestic violence is created by religious or so the traditional values that motivate the man to control that woman, and there's no alcohol, no drugs involved in that,
Yes,
and
yes,
yet it's there. What do we do?
yes. In those cases, it's gone now, because Muslims that move here, they become westernized. But like 30 years ago, among Turks here, a big group of immigrants among Turks here, there was this thing called honor killings. So for example, in a Turkish family, one of the girls has a boyfriend, and that's not done. And they pick someone in the family with the cleanest file, the least so to minimize the prison sentence. They pick someone in the family that's going to kill her, right? That was like 20, 30 years ago. And
What
it's changed, right? And that's something different, because that's they call it honor killing. And that's like a family code, or a cultural thing. But if we're speaking of domestic violence, alcohol.
A quick question to the whole panel. The protest of women in Iran 2 years, 3 years ago, with the unlawful death in custody of the 22-year-old Gina Mahasa Amini, isn't that telling us that certain cultures, especially and particularly those of Abrahamic nature, have a big issue of the relation of how men and women relate to each other based of those beliefs and those structures of belief into cultural sense? Or are we just going to ignore that women stood up in Iran, one of the most repressive countries out there, and said, we want to change?
No, that's so. I agree with you, brother. I believe that the Abrahamic religions is a problem among colonialized and indigenous people. I think that Jose is more along the lines of, and I'm trying to speak for him as he could speak for himself, but I think that he more agreed with the Abrahamic faith and things of that nature. I think it's problematic. So I would just let Jose Bruns answer that question. He kind of like agrees with that idea of the Abrahamic religions more so than I do. He should be able to answer that better than I can. So I'll leave it to him to answer that.
No, it's about the Abrahamic religions. I believe some savages encountered African knowledge, African science, and they didn't understand the core of the message, and they made it some kind of fairy tale bullshit. To me, those books are psychology told with how do you call it, metaphors? What's the other word? So no, I'm not. I'm maybe more against religion than the average atheist. I even see atheism as religion. It's the religion of the ego. Everybody is stupid except me. So no, I'm not. I'm not. I can use the Bible or the Quran against Muslims and Christians. That's what I do on a daily basis. But um, no, it's not an Abrahamic thing. It's you have Muslims in Senegal, and you have Muslims in Iran. And in Senegal, women are holy, and in Iran, women are a tool, an asset.
And follow-up question on this. There are also elements within internal cultural practices that motivate or have generated, for example, the cutting of the clitoris of the woman or the child, because they do it when they're minors. So, alongside the problems of the bad influence of Abrahamic religions, there are, and this is not exclusive to Africa or Latin America, this happens everywhere. There are practices that are of traditional, less Europeanized, less colonized, that still promote that type of violence or subjugation of one to the other. Would you consider that this type of husband schools is necessary to break away those components of negative cultural practices that generate this subjugation?
I think that
Can you rephrase that?
go ahead, Jose.
Can you rephrase the question?
Okay, yeah, sure. I'll make it more direct. Putting aside the question of the Abrahamic religions, throughout different cultures, we have seen that there are certain practices that are also affecting that relation between men and women, or that generate that imposition of men controls women. And those traditional non-colonized, non-European, non-Abrahamic religion type of thing throughout different cultures also play a role into domestic violence, into the subjugation of women, etc. And the question would be, would you consider that this husband schools should also work along the line of saying we have to change those elements that generate that type of violence against women?
Yeah, sure. The funny thing about Islam is that a lot of those denominations act like Catholics. So they have all these other books and wise people from thousand years ago that wrote down this and that and whatever. But if they would follow the Quran, it says there how I see men act, how I see men act in Senegal. That's what it says. You have to keep your wife satisfied, even in the bedroom. You have to perform. So wives can divorce their men if their men are not satisfying, if their men do not do what is expected of men. So these type of schools are necessary in Iran, in Sunnite Sunnite denomination, this would be very helpful to remind the motherfuckers on the Quran. But in West Africa, I don't know, man. I don't know.
No, what I say is, just because the Africans did it prior to the colonialists coming there, that doesn't necessarily make it right. Just because the Taínos
What
did
are
it,
you talking about? What are you talking about? You're not talking about what I said. You're not talking about what I said. To be clear.
No, Jose. No, I'm not talking about what you said. I'm talking about I'm trying to answer Ditso's statements in terms of the cultural practices of the indigenous people prior to the colonialist people coming there and trying to implement their idea of how the world should be set. What I'm saying is, just because the Africans did it prior to the white man or the colonial people coming there, that doesn't necessarily make it right. Just because the Taínos did it, just because the Mayans, because I learned from Mayans, but this will teach me another kind of way of calling them by their rightful name. Just because the Mayans did it, just because the Aztecs did it in a particular way, that doesn't make it right. So I'm saying that everything is up for grabs. Everything is up for scrutiny in terms of how we deal with our internal relationships with one another and what is the right way to do it. So if Traore says that he sees some shortfalls within the culture of Burkina Faso traditionally in how we have related to our women within Burkina Faso, say, well, there's another way to do it. Let me present another way of doing certain things that may be advantageous to us, and he may have listened to the women. He may have had a discussion with the women and say, well, no, when our men do it like this, it's abusive to us. It hurts us. It makes us feel a certain way. No. I would like to see the men in our community do it this way. So he's trying to implement these things on a governmental level where it could be advantageous not only to the Burkina Faso men, but the Burkina Faso women as well. Because you can't only listen to the men because they are stronger. You have to listen to the needs of the women as well. So he has tried to create laws or structures in a way that say, well, listen, this is the better way of going forward in our society. And proper husbandry, proper being able to manage the family, proper being able to relate to the children, all these things should be instructive, because a lot of us sometimes are lost. Ultimately, we should be the head. I don't move on that position, Ditso, and I don't move on that position, Jose. I think that men should be the head. But I believe that how we go about being instructive with our families, I think that it's nothing wrong with good advice. It's nothing wrong with listening to our women. It's nothing wrong with doing certain things in a certain way. Not because it's traditional, not because we have done it historically this way. That don't make it the best way to do it. You know what I mean? With information come understanding. And I think that in talking and discussing and in dialoguing, maybe we could come up with a different kind of analysis and how we relate to one another. And I think that this is an important measure that Traore is trying to implement within his government. That's what I would say. I'll leave it there, brothers.
That was a very good conversation on the panel. And Trigger Happy 262 Plus added some things in the chat that's very good too. I'll try to read some of them now. Actually, he said African spiritual practices are much more progressive, in my opinion, than anything produced from atheism, Abrahamic practices, etc. It's just a matter of reform. So I asked Trigger on the question of circumcision. He said any circumcision is done to both men and women. Focusing on the women part has always been a biased narrative. This isn't a defense of circumcision, but there are cosmological reasons for it. So I asked him, what's the cosmological reasons for that? And he went on to say it has something to do with creation being male and female. Some will say androgynous. He goes on to say So you are removing the male, what is feminine of him, and the female, what is masculine of her. And I found that to be very interesting, frankly. He goes on to say it has nothing to do with violence of women. This is why I think we have to do more studying of our culture and internalizing and criticizing from the outside. He goes on to say many of our people are westernized and will bring their westernized perspective. Even the things that we should reform, they're criticizing from a westernized perspective. He says, I trust the criticism of someone from the culture as opposed to someone outside of it. It isn't to say it isn't to say those outside of it couldn't be ingratiated and be part of the process, but yeah. Lastly, he says to me, there's an article that explains it better than he can. Trigger, I'll ask you if you can send me that on Discord, DM me on Discord and send it, because it's hard for me to get it here on StreamYard, and it's even difficult to get off YouTube afterwards. So if you don't mind sending that to me, I'd like to check it out. If there's no last thoughts here on this topic, very good discussion, guys. Very, very good discussion. And again, this is where I said we need African women in these discussions as well, but I digress. Did someone add something just now? I thought I heard someone's mic open just now. Okay, maybe not.